I didn't look at the theme of the meeting before I chose this particular speech, but how perfect is it that I'm talking about American politics during the chaos meeting? So I hope that those of you who are from outside the US will be able to appreciate this as maybe covering some of the answers, some clues to the question, what the heck's going wrong in America? Because I am going to be talking about some peculiarities of the American system, the way it is structured up, the way it has evolved over the years to where we have something called the two-party system, even though that's not in the Constitution. Many of the people who wrote the Constitution discouraged us from forming political parties in the first place, but this is the way it shakes out. In order to elect a president, in order to elect other chief executives, we wind up forming teams. And other countries do it in, a much more logical, rational way. Isn't that right, Nicola Honey? The UK, with its parliamentary system, has things all figured out, unlike us. But in the US, I'm going to argue that you ought to choose a political party. And this is the trend that I'm reacting against. This is a poll by the Gallup organization. And the runaway leader in party affiliation, again, is none of the above. I don't want to have anything to do with either of these political parties. So we're up to about 42% as no party affiliation voters. And I guess one thing to watch about these statistics, this is the Gallup organization doing public opinion surveys. So this is what people report, which might not be exactly how the voter registration totals act up. But this is what people say. And one interesting thing is that if you ask the voters which way they lean, it actually turns out that independents aren't necessarily that much more independent than anybody else. Most of them have a leaning towards one political party or the other, regardless of whether they have decided to affiliate. What's one other thing that I wanted to mention about this slide, though? In Gallup's report on these trends, one of their, I would say it's really a speculation, but one of their ideas about why partisanship that we think is poisonous and bad in general has gotten more intense is that the people who are not on the extremes are sort of filtering themselves out of the political parties, leaving the two political parties to be more concentrated doses of their viewpoints. So if you want less partisanship, maybe you've got to be part of this trying to get people to choose a side if that's the way the country is going to work things. And more specific than the US, I'm going to talk a little bit about the Florida vote. I originally gave this presentation at my home club. So we can see the no party affiliation. It's actually not as big as you would think based on that last slide from the Gallup organization, but it's about 27% of the vote, close to a third of the vote is not affiliated with either party. And in my local county, it's actually a little bit higher, 28%. It's actually more voters identify as no party affiliation than identify as Republicans. And why does all this matter? Trying to cut through some of the blah, blah, blah here. Well, these are the 3 dates that are significant in Florida. And can you guess what those 3 dates are? Well, when I asked the audience at my home club, somebody said the first one, well, that must be Super Tuesday. Which it's not, because Florida is not part of Super Tuesday. Super Tuesday in 2020 will be March 3rd, so a couple of weeks before that. And those of you who don't know what Super Tuesday is, there are a bunch of states that all hold the primaries on the same day. And it's somewhat of an intentional effect to try and get a snowballing support behind some particular candidate by having somebody on that particular date. So we have a presidential preference primary, which only comes around every 4 years. The parties decide who's going to represent themselves in the presidential race. And then in August, and the dates would vary depending on your part of the country, we have a primary election that usually covers congressional races, might cover some local races. In my area, it also includes the school board election. And if a candidate wins more than 50% of the vote, they're elected. If they don't, then they go to a runoff in the general election. And then November 3rd will be the big day. But in my state, at least, if you're not part of a political party, you miss out on 2 of these 3 chances. And miss out, well, I think it's a bad thing not to be able to vote. But I also think it's a bad thing for smart folks like you not to be part of deciding who the ultimate choices are going to be. We want to have better choices by the time we get to the final decision, the final election date. In the schoolhouse rock ideal of how this is supposed to work, the 2 parties would pick the wisest, the most experienced, the most level-headed, smartest people out of all the country, and they would match them up and we would vote. And for some reason, it doesn't seem to work out that way. Maybe some of that comes into this negative partisanship that we perceive to be happening in our country. But to play the game, to be a part of this process and to try and make it better, you should affiliate with a political party. Now, I happen to have a strong preference. I go out and do voter registration with a clipboard too, and I would like people to register as a Democrat. I'm not allowed to tell them that. But when they get to that line where they're supposed to check off political party affiliation, they tend to ask me, do I have to? No, you don't have to, but you should to more fully participate in the process. Here is where you can go to register or update your voter registration. This is a national nonprofit that will direct you to the various state websites you would need to go to. And at the end of the day, I want you to be able to say that I voted and I voted in the primary.